All right, so we have a special fireside chat for you guys. You might have seen her around. She's with Microsoft, and you might have seen him on TV, really big poker guy. If you guys are into poker, all things poker. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome on stage Willayna Banner with Microsoft and Joey Ingram.
Thank you.
Test. Is it on?
I know.
Okay.
Are we
I'm
good?
not sure.
We're on.
Can you guys hear me?
Hi, everybody.
How's everybody doing? Thanks everybody for coming out. It's my first time doing I usually do on YouTube, so I got my chat. And let's see if this is working or not.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So it's a little weird doing it in front of actual people, seeing everybody's here, but great to be everybody here, guys. Nice to see everybody. My name is Joey Ingram from the poker world, and I'm used to talking to some of the high-stakes poker players and these crazy people I know, and this is one of my first times at an event just like this. Shout out to Rand putting this great event on out here, for inviting me out here. And
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to be joined here by Miss Willayna Banner. She's been in the corporate banking world about 20 years, working with Morgan Stanley, HBO, which I still got a lot of questions about.
Yeah.
American Express, Bank of America.
Yeah.
Wells Fargo, and now you're running you're head of blockchain,
Microsoft.
Web3 over at Microsoft, and we're going to talk a lot more about how you got there. And I'm excited for people to get to hear more about your story. I'm sure this will be posted on YouTube, and there's not much out there about you, so I'm personally excited. I got a lot of questions about,
Awesome.
how you're creating the next part of the world. Microsoft's a very influential company, so I'm excited to be here. Great to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, thank you again, everybody. I'm Willayna Banner. Thank you as well to Wes and to Rand and all things Rare Evo. This has been incredible so far. We'll actually be chatting just in kind of the personal capacity about our personal thoughts versus maybe the corporate side of things, but that's all good. Yeah. There's a lot going on, always something else around the corner, so.
Yeah, right. So you want to talk a little bit about how you ended up working at Microsoft and
Sure.
how you got there?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I've been in financial services a long time. I started in investment banking and corporate banking. I also did a stint in media entertainment at HBO, which was a really good time to be there because that was during the Sex and the City and Sopranos days. Heavyweight boxing was also really huge, so that was a great time. And then American Express as well. Again, all kind of financial planning and analysis, corporate banking after the IB stint, and that was all in Manhattan. Then I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am now, and moved with Bank of America and was doing corporate banking there, and then I moved to the enterprise chair for third-party management and governance. So I was leading that for the bank. So there was a lot going on. You have all of the regulatory bodies saying you're doing everything wrong, nobody knows how to manage their vendors, stuff like that. Then moved deeper into risk and was the business controls executive for the chief administrative office. All that to be said, in Charlotte, Wells Fargo and Bank of America are like 2 blocks away from each other. So I didn't even have to move my parking deck when I moved down the street to Wells Fargo. And it was about a month after the sales practice kind of debacle happened, right? So it was eyes wide open for me, but I love a good comeback story. And there's a lot of great folks there, and was able to do a lot of good work in the cards, retail, merchant services part of the business, and ran a function called business delivery. So to that point, I'd been sitting on the other side of the table for many, many years. And so I was like, all right, well, where do I want to go next? I'd been kind of living and breathing the blockchain space on my own for some years, and moved to Microsoft, not in technology at first, and moved into this particular seat to run Web3 blockchain last year in May. And so that's been an incredible experience. And then here in the last couple months, I also took on banking, insurance, and trust. So that's kind of the career story. But yeah, I sit in the engineering seat to help us figure out how we want to meet our customer and partner needs. So it's a good time.
Yeah, that's what I saw about when I was looking at your resume and kind of looking at what you do. It seems like you're overseeing a lot of different departments. It's not working.
Is Joey on?
Test it.
No.
Give me a mic or something like that. Yeah, just give me a mic. Thanks. Test. Are we alive? How's everybody doing? Good? You guys excited? I'm pretty excited to be here. I don't know. I don't go to a lot of these. Maybe you guys might be professionals at attending these conferences, but I think this is pretty cool. So I'm loving meeting a lot of the people out here. Are you good?
I think we could also share.
Are they not going to get? Are you guys going to get one more mic?
Yeah. Yes. And we're back.
Okay, cool. So my question I have for you is how. So you're overseeing a bunch of different things at Microsoft. So you're mainly working with partners. It sounds like it kind of sounds to me that your strength or your expertise in a number of different areas, but especially in partnerships and basically working with some of the biggest corporations in the banking side of things around the world.
That's true.
Who are helping to decide where reality basically is going to go.
Yeah.
So now you're in this position with Microsoft where you're able to collaborate with these people and you're able to kind of be very imaginative, it almost seems like, in terms of what the status of regulation and what the status of the services products are going to be when you are working with these companies and they're trying to evolve their strategies.
That's spot on, actually. So yeah, from the corporate capacity, that's absolutely true. I think from an individual capacity as well, there's actually quite a bit that should continue to happen as well in that space in terms of how we think about thought leadership and influencing what we're actually doing here. I mean, there's obviously a retail side to the space and then a wholesale side of things too. And of course that pops up with CBDCs and other things. I think we're gonna get into that. But yeah, from the day job perspective, that's absolutely what happened. So that's pretty exciting. On my own, I'd been kind of living the space for 7 or 8 years before I got in the seat. And so it's been a really cool evolution, as so many of us have experienced, in terms of folks just kind of tinkering around with the notion of what these technologies can do for not just the US, but frankly all over the world, especially for underserved communities and things like that, vis-a-vis where we are now. So that's been pretty incredible.
Yeah, what made you want to take on this ambitious role and be in the corporate banking world for over 20 years, kind of grind up the stakes, and now you're basically saying that you want to take a position with this major company that's going to be very important, and it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure. And what made you want to even take that risk or take that sort of, because you could have stayed in your old position, you probably could have lived a great life for as long as you wanted to do.
Well,
but you kind of stepped outside of that comfortable position, in my opinion, when I'm looking at it from my perspective, to go with Microsoft, which is a little bit different move than being in banking in Charlotte, and you go to Microsoft and you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to change my life a lot.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Look, I found that, great risk, great reward, that type of thing. I mean, as a brand, obviously, it's a great company. I've been able to be a part of a lot of great brands and great companies doing some cool things. It was kind of like, what's the next frontier, though, right? And I mean, for all of us here, I'm sure that's why we live and breathe this space ourselves, because it's the next frontier. And so what I was seeing from a traditional finance standpoint, that it was ripe for disruption, and that in particular blockchain technologies would be able to be a part of that story in what could be a pretty material way. And so, look, I wanted to be a part of that. I actually had a manager some years ago reference that I was a smoke jumper, like in the best way. It was part of like a year-end review, and I'm like, okay, and I know what that would mean, like a paratrooper, right? But like, yeah, you're kind of like a smoke jumper. Like I can just kind of fly you over anything, just put you somewhere, and you just get in there and figure it out, even if it's ambiguous. And I really took that to heart. I found that to be a really high compliment, but I find that this space is no different, right? In terms of so much gray we're dealing with. Like, this is not just black and white. This is not just zeros and ones. There's quite a bit of ambiguity. And so to have any of us in this space trying to figure it out, especially for the greater good, all the better.
Yeah, I think that's what got a lot of people into crypto, in addition to making a lot of money, is they, because obviously the new frontier, there's a big market, the competition's open, a lot of different ways you can monetize and make money and build businesses, and you can invest in the businesses now. So obviously a lot of people are excited about that. And in your position, or in some positions with some of these companies, is they're basically shaping how humanity is going to exist in the future. So I know some people are very interested in that for good reasons and bad reasons. So you mentioned that you thought it was ripe for disruption because you've been on that side of things. So how do you see, what are the big differences between what's possible with using blockchain technology versus using traditional financial services technology?
No, I mean, it's a great question, right? Like, the name of the game, at least in my mind, is efficiency plays, right? So how can we get more efficiency in what's a really, in some places, inefficient system? Within financial services in particular, I mean, you think about how some companies are looking to explore this. It's going to be on the payment side of things or a clearing and settlement side of things, like in capital markets. You're going to have trade finance, also as an example, verifiable identities and those types of things. Again, how can you create more efficiencies to be able to do things more effectively? Something as simple as getting a mortgage, right? So for those of us who've gone through this super fun process of getting a mortgage, pretty laborious, a lot of paperwork going back and forth. It can take anywhere from 30 days, if it's maybe more of a nightmare, 60 days longer, right, to get this done. So what could be created to have something that's more templated from a smart contract perspective and be executed much more quickly without kind of the human error component that can sometimes come into that, and again, create more efficiencies. That's kind of a win for everyone. That's a win for the end customer, who's of course going to be the recipient of that particular mortgage in that case, but also on the business side of things for how many humans actually need to touch certain paperwork to get that mortgage through. And again, that's just a really simple example. Another one that I also found pretty interesting was actually a couple years ago, and that was in the aviation space. So GE Aviation, realized that, okay, there's some efficiencies to be gained here, leveraging blockchain technologies and making sure that there's not counterfeit or fraudulent parts going through the system for airplanes. And so they partnered together, right, within aviation, and I think PwC came out with a report that's saying, hey, if folks continue to use this, it can increase the revenue by $40 billion, which is like 4% of all that the money is to be made there, and that's material, right? That's material, that's something that really hits the bottom line, and again, that's about kind of the efficiency gains there. So, that's absolutely been my experience. I think, 80 to 85% of companies are still kind of tinkering around with the idea. What does it mean? How do I use it? How do I get, people skilled to even know how to use it, especially in traditional financial institutions? But then of those like 15% who are ready to go and who are saying, yes, this is something I know how to do, I know what I want to use it, again, for efficiencies, is awesome, and I think it'll grow. I personally think that number will grow, not even withstanding all the fun stuff coming with AI and everything that.
Are you allowed to talk about that? I know that Microsoft.
We're not gonna turn this.
Bought ChatGPT. Can you tell us some more? You want me to ask you the real questions, or you want me to ask you the?
But to the point, right? I mean,
unofficial questions.
Think about it. No, think about it honestly, because, even from an AI perspective, just real quick, we were not collectively talking about AI in this way even a year ago, right? And then all of a sudden, sky's the limit, AI everything, it's everywhere, how do you use it, how do you test it, ChatGPT, all this stuff. That's how technology works, right? And so when you think about what's gonna still be there next year or the following year, how can we make sure that these types of technologies are still gonna be around, they're still gonna be useful into perpetuity, so we can really hang our hat on them, right? So that's part of the fun.
So what you're seeing is, what are you seeing in terms of how daily life might be different for people? So you mentioned about a mortgage, so like a certain activity that someone might do in the financial services when they're interacting with a bank, for example, might be quicker, might be efficient, might be less bullshit, stuff like that. But where are you sort of seeing that, from where it is now to where it might be 5 years, 10 years, what might change with life?
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have, right? I mean, look, coming from more the kind of enterprise financial institution side of things, I'm seeing the application, let's say, primarily in banking and even in capital markets most specifically. When I think about how that gets down to all of us, just like as kind of retail, lay folks, it could be pretty substantial, even in terms of central bank digital currencies, right? And the movement and the growth that we're seeing there. If you look at CBDCs, What I find interesting about that in particular is that there's less than 200 central banks in the world anyway, right? So that's actually, on a relative basis, a pretty small group to deal with. Now, this is a lot of work. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be there. You know, of all the countries today exploring CBDCs, only one has launched a CBDC, that's Nigeria. For the others, I'd say north of 70% are tinkering in some way. So they might be in the research side of things, they might be in a kind of proof of concept, or even in a pilot situation in terms of where they are on the spectrum. But that's a real thing that's not going away, right? Even here in the US, you had, in March 9th of last year, President Biden come out with his executive order saying, hey, this is something in the US we need to be exploring and thinking about in more detail. How can we make it safe? How can we protect the consumer? That type of thing. And so what might people's lives look like, especially that most all of us do so much on our phones, right? But that we're now going to have so many other things being executed on digitally, including our currency, like traditional kind of fiat currency. I mean, look, sky's the limit. I think that we'll probably chop it up later and figure out in the exhibit hall and others, like what we think the world's gonna look like. But I mean, that's just the blockchain technology side of things. You've got the metaverse side of things potentially too, right? I mean, telehealth and visiting your doctor in the metaverse. Like, I mean, there's so many different things that could be different and could be happening. But I also think that one of the really cool aspects of the technology, provided that we all collectively lean into the education side of things, because what would be really negative is leaving folks behind in the movement, right? And folks not being able to participate, especially when I think one of the beauties of the technology is the access that can come with that. And so provided that that's there and happening, and I think we collectively lean into that from an education perspective, having this technology around for, again, some of the underserved communities, countries as well that maybe have less stability than perhaps we're afforded here in the US, I think could be remarkable.
Yeah, how realistic do you think that is? Because doesn't everybody always have that goal where they want everyone to get educated on whatever they care about, and all the Bitcoin people, they want everyone to know everything about Bitcoin 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Kind of you're saying the same thing. Now people got to learn about blockchain, so you have to introduce these educational, systems and programs in these different communities, which obviously that's a whole other issue altogether. So it seems like a little unrealistic to expect people to really understand how the technology works. Most people don't even understand how their phone works, right? They don't understand how littlest technology works in some ways. So
I think that's maybe the one of the distinctions, right? Like, I flew here on an airplane from Charlotte. I don't know how to fly the thing, right? But I know how to potentially keep myself as safe as possible. I know how to read the signage. I know how to put on my seatbelt. Like, there are some of these things, right, that I do know how to use and execute. What I don't think we would want to do, and again, my personal opinion, I don't think we're saying everyone needs to now be knowledgeable on zero knowledge proofs and node hosting and the actual technology. How many things do we use every single day that, to your point, our phones, like I turn it on, hope it works, and hope I can call out, right? I don't think we're calling on folks to do that, but I do think from an application perspective, from a use case perspective, from making sure that maybe some of the fundamentals can make sense, especially the business problems, or even just personal problems, peer-to-peer problems we're trying to solve, that I think that's kind of at least what I'm talking about in terms of education, because
I see, making people aware.
All of those, any new technology can be really scary for folks. That type of transformation can be super scary for folks. So we're just trying to demystify it a little bit. That'd be a good thing.
Yeah, I think that sounds like it's what a lot of people are trying to do. That's why all the content creators are making content. They're doing podcasts, interviews. People are having to explain themselves over and over, and that's how people start to understand things, is through repetition. So
exactly.
I know you mentioned CDBCs. Obviously, it's a whole other topic. Programmable money and those concepts as well. So on the regulation side of things, when you're working with all these companies, and the companies don't know what the rules are going to be, how hard is that for you to sort of manage that relationship in terms of what's possible, what's it going to look like? Because the regulation, everyone, it seems to me when I'm observing the industry, if they're waiting for rules to be in place, you have some people that don't want rules, they want to do whatever they want to do. You know, I do too as well. Everybody wants to do that. It makes sense. So, but other people want these rules and regulations. So, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, look, collectively, we will all be much further along when the regulatory clarity presents itself, right? One of the examples I use often, which when it happened in real time, I don't know about you guys if you remember this, but last summer, it's like May, June timeframe. In this case, it was the BIS in Europe was putting forth a proposal to essentially say, I'm paraphrasing, but saying, look, you know, distributed ledger technology, cryptocurrencies, crypto assets, you know, there's a lot of unknowns there. From a protection standpoint, we're proposing to mandate financial institutions that hold crypto assets to also have a certain amount of reserves that you have to hold as well, kind of as a backstop. What they called out in that proposal was actually an exclusion for algorithmic stablecoins, right? So like a Terra USD would be an example. And I see Rand's already smiling because you know where I'm going. So they said, hey, algorithmic stablecoins, which essentially, right, are just a stablecoin that's pegged to a currency. They're saying, hey, that's more safe, right? And so you don't have to have as many reserves if you hold that. That proposal came out in May of last year. No. That proposal came out in June. Terra USD collapsed in May. So like weeks before that proposal. So here you had Terra USD collapsing in May, which I don't know about you guys, but I could not have myself predicted, right? Nobody could have kind of predicted that, where it kind of depegged itself. $14 billion was lost in a day. And a couple weeks later, you have this proposal that I'm guessing would have been worked on for months and months by a lot of really smart people saying, yeah, algorithmic stablecoins are safer. That's just one example, right? These are the types of surprises, though, that absolutely still happen in this market all the time that folks are just trying to get their arms around, right? So it's not a trivial exercise, in my opinion, to be having, you know, regulatory clarity, because not only do you need to have it for a certain jurisdiction or geography, but if here in the US, we're approaching something markedly different than our neighbors across the pond or what have you, that means you're not potentially going to have the level of interoperability that you would need to make the whole ecosystem work, right? And so this is where, again, folks are kind of chipping away at it, trying to learn as they go, that type of thing. And I think, you know, personally, I think we'll get there. But this is also why it hasn't happened tomorrow. And this is also why we're maybe not collectively as far down the path as some of us would like. But I also think, for what it's worth, if you look at even the evolution of the internet, nobody talks about Mosaic anymore from like 1993, right? Just because you're out first doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna stick the landing later and be around, right? And so this is where I think, frankly, having a measured approach to this is helpful. And so for the institutions that are looking at adoption and again, trying to figure out what's best, I think a measured approach can be appropriate. That doesn't mean that we don't want innovation to run as fast as it can, but we also need to make sure that in perpetuity, we'll have something that's consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, I mean, we were talking about this the other day, and you mentioned that, you know, it seems like there's a lot of people who think that the crypto world or the blockchain world or this new finance world is going to get built without the old traditional financial institutions. Right. And you obviously come from that position, so I know that you're going to be more on a bull of the, you know, those corporations, those companies. So how do you see that intersection happening where you have these, you know, the rebels or the smoke jumpers, as you called them earlier, who are in these other space, and they've got this other vision for how the space is going to look. And then you have the Jamie Dinans, and you have these traditional finance giants who are saying, okay, well, now this is becoming more legitimate. Let's work our way in. Microsoft, let's work our way in. Let's try to sort of merge these two people together and figure out what this path forward is going to look like in terms of, I feel like regulation falls into that category when I'm looking at it from my perspective. So
no,
what do you think?
It's a really fair question. And, you know, my personal opinion is that, again, this is not zeros and ones. This is not just because I want to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. Like there, in my opinion, must be kind of a hybrid approach to this. I do not believe personally that banks will allow themselves to be disintermediated. I just don't think that's going to be a thing. And so while there will be still peer-to-peer interactions where you won't necessarily need, a big bank in the middle, I do think there could be some value as well still extracted from those who like to have that safety net, or to the point, think about how we have recourse in our lives every single day. If I lock my keys, if I lose my keys to my car, I could potentially have someone come or even remotely, right, open my car. If I lose my password for logging into my bank account, I can get one auto-generated and someone can send that back to me. Again, AAA if I need assistance, right? There's recourse, and I think us as humans, we sometimes might take that for granted, but that's kind of the backstop. When you think about what we're doing and where we're going in this space, and this notion of, oh, okay, I'm in charge of my keys, I'm the one who's, right? That can sound amazing if and until you lose them. If and until, and we've heard these stories, right? If and until you misplace your cold wallet, or if and until you do not have a backstop for that. And that can also be a very scary proposition, even though now we're empowered to do something different and to kind of operate in a different way. And so again, I think there could be a middle ground there that we could strike, where everyone doesn't have to be right and everyone doesn't have to be wrong, but there's ways that they can kind of play together. That's just, again, my view, but I can understand.
Definitely one side of it, right?
I can understand different points of view from different folks, right? And why there's value in maybe what they staunchly believe, but for this all to work, there's a lot of things that really have to come together. So, I mean, that's what keeps me excited about the space.
Yeah, what's got you the most excited? I asked you this last night. I said, what's got you? Because you can be excited about anything in any direction, which is a pretty unique spot to be in. You're kind of overseeing, and you get to choose the path in some ways.
Well, yeah, again, I'm grateful from my day job perspective, but I would say just as a person, individually, it's just fascinating. Right? Like, I'm excited that, there's certain podcasts or, articles or things I'll read, like, every single morning, right? Different creators, and getting up to speed on the news, just the progression. Some of it's speedy, some of it's not so speedy. I'm just thrilled about where it's going and the potential that it could have on our society as a whole. Not because this is the panacea of all things that ails us, right? This isn't going to cure something in particular, but I do think it can be a really effective, blockchain technology, as that is, it can be an incredibly effective how, right? There's the what and there's the how. It can be an incredibly effective how to get things done, to remove inefficiencies, to help people in a material way, and that's really exciting. Like, cool. That on its face, I think is really exciting.
Well, hey, I got about 100,000 more questions about. I'm obsessed with banking and finance right now, so it's very.
I know we're coming up on time.
Yeah, our time's up. So yeah, listen. I appreciate everybody for tuning in here. I know I see one person out there with a question. I don't know what our rules are, if we're allowed to go over or not, but.
I'll also be out on the side too after we're done. If folks want to come up and chat, I'm here and around. But,
yeah, you'll be in the back.
Yeah, I'll be in the back.
All right, cool. Well, listen, let's wrap it up. They gave me my 30 minutes here. Ms. Banner, a pleasure to meet you. A pleasure to talk with you.
All right,
everybody out there, thanks a lot. Hope you guys enjoy yourselves. Have a good trip.
Thanks,
Shout out to Rand as well for setting this up.
Go Rare Evo.
See you guys later today.
Claim your official proof of participation in Rare Evo 2023. Whether you attend physically or tune in on the live stream, you get a free NFT painted by Brendan O'Connell live from our Expo Hall floor, and you get whitelisted for the Rare Perks NFT presale. By claiming, you will be entered into a giveaway of multiple rewards, including the original one-of-one physical painting by Brendan, along with exclusive access and opportunities for Rare Evo 2024, including, but not limited to, free general admission and VIP passes, a 10x10 booth, workshop space, and more.